Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Munir Lazouzi from easymedicaldevice.com. And today I wanted to help you to gather clinical data. And for that, I have with me a guest that has written a great article on LinkedIn. And I was asking myself, maybe this guy should come to the podcast and really educate our people. So we have on the podcast, David Rutledge from Strategic Global Solution. So he's the CEO of Strategic Global Solution. And he will help us to define how to collect clinical data. So David, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Thank you, Munir. Thank you for the invitation. I wanted to let you know that I've listened to every one of your podcasts, and I've been following you for a while, and you're doing great work. And I wanted to point out three things that there's many, but I'll limit it to three that I thought was very, very important in terms of the work that you're doing. Number one, the topics that you're covering have all been timely, and they've been very practical for your followers on your YouTube channel and your website in terms of your podcast or blogs. And number two, I really am very pleased as a former academician, teacher of the year, faculty of the year in an earlier career of mine, to see how you've developed a training program, because there is a need out there for people to get trained in medical devices, especially with the changes that are occurring all over the world, but also in Europe.
Yeah, yeah, we are talking here about the mini course that I've done, and we have now so much students. So thank you, everybody. You were really great. There was some that really passed the mini course. They got their certificates, and I'm really proud of that, because it helped them really to understand the MDR. And thank you, David, for that, because it's really a great achievement. I've done that, I think, 1 year ago or 2 years ago. I can't remember how long it takes now. But it's really a good thing.
It's really meeting a great need. And finally, you're providing, recently been providing really nice tools for your subscribers. And I even downloaded one just to take a look at that MDR technical documentation file that you had available. And it was wonderful. It was right on, spot on. I've got several versions of that that I've compared it to. But those are, practical things that really empower people to really be compliant and to meet the expectations of the medical device regulation.
Yeah,
so,
thank you for that.
Great job there.
Yeah, you're right. So recently, I just so for the audience that maybe don't know, I just launched a shop where I'm providing some templates. Because there were a lot of people that were asking me, do you have a template for this? Do you have a template for that? So I decided maybe I should build those templates and start to offer them to people. So on the shop. So I hope it's really helpful for people. For now, I had nobody complaining, so I think it's a sign.
I looked at all the templates, but I actually purchased one from you also just to have as a hard copy. So it was really good. And you got that free one too, the medical device classification one. That's really good. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I already had provided some free templates, and now I started to build more sophisticated ones. So thank you for that. So for people, I can put that also on the show notes so that they can see where they can find that if they are interested. No obligation, but it's something that really I'm trying to provide to help the community to finalize their projects, because I know there is a lot of projects that are not, because maybe they don't know exactly what to provide, like a technical file and everything. So it's great. Okay, David, so let's go back to the episode now. So as we said, first introduction of yourself. So can you tell us more about you, who you are, so that the audience can really understand what's your background? And then we can go through the different questions about the clinical data, how to get
Right. Yeah, I have had several careers in academia, as an example, as an assistant associate full professor, tenured full professor, chairman of a department. So I'm very familiar with how academic medical centers run. And during that time, I got inducted as a fellow of the American Heart Association because of lots of different reasons, research and service that I was doing and the publications that I had and things. I then joined a big pharma company. And was there for about 6 or 7 years in the R&D piece of the business, mainly in cardiovascular, but then got into other areas as well. And then for 13 years, I was in the medical device business, with lots of different experiences all over the world, working with several notified bodies and competent authorities all over the world. And so I have sort of like a CLIN reg quality kind of background as an example. One of the neat things that happened while I was in the industry is the Health and Human Resources, Food and Drug Administration, I guess it's HHS, Health and Human Services, Food and Drug Administration, appointed me as a 4-year appointment to a medical device panel, working with the agency on one of their medical device panels that they had. And that was a great experience for me to see how the FDA worked in the background, and then what happened the day of the panel when we were there with the industry, them presenting their case for approval. That was really good experience. Learned an awful lot from the agency from that perspective. You can follow me on LinkedIn and mainly email, which you'll have on the screen. You can. Those are the two best ways. I'm noticing that the sun's coming in my window here, so I'm going to try to get out of the sun a little bit here.
No problem. So anyway, I will put on the show notes all the details for you, so that people can catch up with you. Okay, David. So maybe now let's go to the meat of the episode and try to make people understand of the clinical data source. So my first question is, why do we need clinical data? So what is the purpose for that?
Well, it's really interesting. A friend of mine brought this to my attention back in 2017 in September at the National Harbor Conference Center in Washington, D.C. at the D.C. waterfront. I was asked to present on some clinical evidence and developing post-market clinical follow-up plans and things. And what the article on LinkedIn was about and what we're talking about today was actually talked about in September 2017. And so it's not new, but it is receiving a lot of attention right now. And basically, why do we need clinical data? It really nails into 3 pieces of the MDR. You can talk about the preamble part of the MDR about why this was developed and stuff. But if you look at Article 61 on page 55, if you look at Annex 1 on page 94, and then Annex 14 on page 164, then those will give you 3 places to answer that question about why do we need clinical data. It's in the law. It's required. We need to have evidence to support product approval and continued approval. I have down here on my notes, optimism is not data. Confidence is good, but evidence and facts are better. And we're really long past the days of manufacturers saying we believe that our product is safe and performs well and things like that. We need to really be making decisions based upon evidence.
Yeah, it's still what I'm reading sometime when I'm reading some clinical evaluation report or some technical files where it says, our data are good, our data are correct, our product is safe, everything is fine. But when you deep dive on it, you say, which data do you have that are really showing that are really proving that your product is safe? And then it's we had 20 years of experience, etc. So as you said, optimism is not really something that notified body or the authorities are looking for. They are looking for data so that they are in good shape.
Yeah, so I think the problem really is that manufacturers don't have enough clinical data to really show conformity to Annex 1 as an example, and meet the requirements and expectations of the clinical evidence depending on the risk class of the device. So that's why we need clinical data is more urgently now than others is because it is in the law. It's not new, but it is in the law. It's being emphasized, and manufacturers have a need to build their technical documentation up in this area to be able to show conformity assessments.
Now that we know that it's kind of mandatory, it's a legislation, you need to have that. now I'm a manufacturer and I say, okay, I need to have clinical data. How do I get those clinical data? So when I discussed with you and when I read your article, you were showing some source of data from the smallest one to the biggest one. So I want you, if possible, that we can go through that and maybe one by one to show the first source possible, the second source, and then we can see, maybe the people can then see which one is best suitable for them.
Yeah, and and during your podcast here, you can put up some screenshots, and I've got slides for everybody in PowerPoint so you can use them internally in your organization to use. But I wanted to preface that by saying that the value of your company in part is going to be due directly to the quality of the data that you have. And number two, finding this clinical data should not be like a scavenger hunt in your technical documentation. It should be clearly there and in an obvious format. So there's basically, even in 2017, when I presented this way back in Washington, D.C., there's basically I presented 6 methods to create the clinical data. And, all this assumes that, you're following local and national regulations in terms of patient privacy laws and good clinical practice and safety reporting, et cetera. But the first thing had to do, and it's really the lowest level of evidence and least costly. And on the slide, I give some parameters around that to help you adjust it to your business model and your currency to have some discussions internally. But would be surveys, and surveys are good to be able to get data immediately. And so in my experience here, we've worked with several hospital systems and countries trying to develop some surveys to get clinical evidence either for local competent authority or for a notified body. And so I put together some assumptions that you need that I make about this, and then some sort of potential risk. And so I'll do all these 6 in that kind of a format. So from an assumption standpoint, I have found it as a best practice to try to find, I would call a manufacturer-friendly healthcare practitioner to help you develop the survey. Okay. And I prefer to use the Likert method. And on the website, I've given Manir 37 examples of types of Likert questions that you can use. These are the ones like I strongly agree, I agree, I neither agree nor disagree, I disagree, and then I strongly disagree. They're kind of in that format, but there are all kinds of this, like never, rarely, sometimes, often, always, and you can develop some good questions about this. But it's going to be really important that you develop a key question here. And let's say you have 10 of these questions. Let's as an example. Try to develop a sample size based upon your expected outcome for one of those questions. Your key one, your key safety or performance question. You can get feedback directly and really quickly. And here, there's one piece where you can take the survey and mail it out. And that's not what I have been doing in the past. I think it's important to get somewhat the right individuals from the manufacturer to in front of the healthcare practitioner. It's a good customer-facing activity, and it'll help you get into a good dialogue about what the issues are. So those are sort of some assumptions around that. These things can cost anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 US, and you can make the conversion in your country.
So mainly about the survey. So as you mentioned, so it's a tool that can be easily done, quick, but the difficult part is really to build that survey, to have the right question, to have the right information. And as you mentioned, there's something that was great, is just not to mail it just to people that they have to fill it, because at the end, I'm sure there are some people that will just fill information quickly without really understanding maybe what is really mentioned there, or maybe misunderstanding something, and then the outcome will not be really what you are expecting. So having really somebody that is going and looking at the information and explaining can be really a good strategy. Yeah, absolutely. So some of the risk here real quickly about this first area of these surveys are limited statistical experience analyzing surveys in the clinical research quality or regulatory environment.
I know that in our commercial marketing and sales organizations, there's lots of experience doing surveys, but with limited hypothesis testing and statistical validity and those kind of things. So it's an area that I think is a potential growth area, especially for many of the listeners on your podcast today, that this is a great area to develop an expertise on and really add value to for your company. There's low return rates, and so that's why I say it's really important to go out there and if you're just relying on mailing, that's going to be a problem. You have also the potential of what I refer to as having non-representative samples. So you want to try to control that by targeting hospital systems where you know your product is being used and all kinds of users, experienced middle users, those who are just now using your product. It is the lowest level of evidence in the sense of the options that are available. And I did mention about privacy laws that you need to follow. And I did have a thing in the article about this could be a trap because budget managers and CFOs in organizations will see how cheap this is relative to running massive clinical investigations, and they'll say, we'll do all of our post-market clinical follow-up plans and reports doing surveys, but that's usually not going to be the right method for higher risk devices, implantables, and it may be a portion of what you want to do, but you can't rely on this for your active implantable devices as an example. So
okay.
So there is yeah.
So great. So now that we have clarified everything about survey, so what is the next source possible?
Yeah. So the next being, this is going from like least costly to most costly. So the next one would be large hospital databases. I refer to this as big data. I've been doing this for several years, working with all different types of database around the world. I think I had, I don't know, 5 or 6 of 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5 or 6 of these all over the world. And the one that I had the most experience with is a database called 1M Data, and they've got a large network of hospital database connections where you can get safety and performance on all the devices. But here, you really want to get these large databases that are very good geographically based, and these databases have been used, and I've used them personally with getting product approvals or reapprovals or answering questions that an agency may have with the FDA, several notified bodies, NMPA in China as an example. You need to find someone at that hospital system that's going to be an advocate for your company. I call them the manufacturer-friendly healthcare person. And you need to find the person responsible for the database, because they're going to know what's in the database and how it can be extracted. And this captures real-world experience, which is on-label and off-label experience. And I think that's a good thing because we're required as a manufacturer to understand the possible systematic misuse or off-label use of the product. So it's actually a good thing. So some of the potential,
just one thing. So when you are talking about database and hospitals, so is it databases that the manufacturer is providing? I mean, or it's the hospital that has that, and we just ask the hospital to fill this database with their information, etc. So is it something that you are paying the hospital to do for you, and is there some kind of criteria for inclusion of data, or they should include everything there, or what they see? So what? Yeah,
it's the latter, Munir. And from a budget standpoint, I put in there that $20,000 US as an example, and that'd be kind of year over year kind of expenses because you want to get information on the product over the lifetime of the device. And there, like, there's a lot of electronic systems all over the world, but there's very few that sort of would meet the qualifications of being able to be used. One would be, what kind of quality control systems do they have in place in terms of monitoring that database, auditing the database, as an example. You need to, and that's why it's very important to go there and to meet with the healthcare practitioner and the database person, because a lot of times you're going to get safety information based upon what was billed to the patient during the event that happened, And if you don't have those billing pieces of the database attached to the procedure pieces of the database, it's not going to be the right database today for you to go to. You need to have one where they can seamlessly tell the story about a particular patient, as an example.
So are we opening this database for a certain time, or it's something that is always open, or how frequent are we collecting the data from it?
Yeah, so typically my experience has been that we would get contract with the institution, and then for a particular report, and then we would have in the contract that we would want this year over year. A lot of hospital systems right now don't want to go into long-term commitments, so they may say, let's do this every year and update your contract, or maybe every 2 years. But it's and you could put clauses in there that if you needed to go back and address the database, depending on feedback you get from a notified body, as an example, that there may be 1 or 2 more rounds of additional analysis that may need to occur based upon the initial analysis.
Okay.
One of the risks here, Munir, is the contract process. This could take anywhere from 6 to 18 months, but once you get it in place, it's really good to be able to get data quickly. You also need to always remember, don't just rely on one database out there. Always begin trying to look for other databases all over the world where you can go to and get data. So I have one of the risks is the need for continually expanding your network of databases. And the other thing I would say that you do want, your manufacturers are required to understand how their device performs as intended in the population. But we also, as a manufacturer, need to understand, misuse of the product too, and then maybe real world practice of the product to make sure that our intended use is correct in representing real world practice of the device. So it's really good from that perspective too, to help you understand that.
Okay. So
the next one? The next one is it's in that category of investigator-sponsored studies. Here, this is the ITTs, or the manufacturer is not the regulatory holder of the responsibility, but the physician institution would be. I put these in the category of like 200,000 per product. I mean, it could range from 100,000 to hundreds of thousands, but from a budgetary standpoint, you could look at it like that. You get great safety and performance information. You get year-over-year data cuts and things. The contracts are usually with the institution, not the physician. And so if the physician leaves, I say the physician, the healthcare practitioner leaves the institution, you can actually maybe promote a sub-investigator to that role and continue on. The risk here are, the practical thing here is that investigators are really not interested in getting information on core products, as an example. It's not interesting to them to do that. Data quality, excuse me, maybe not as high because of a lack of monitoring and a lack of auditing. You manufacturers usually cannot direct research, so we're really more taking a hands-off approach from that perspective. There is a long lead time for those of you that are involved in clinical research. You know how long it takes to get the project off the ground, and data may not align with the product label. You may have things that are off label, and basically the healthcare practitioners really, from an investigator-sponsored standpoint, they really like to excuse me, they really like to study more risky populations that are beyond what the label has. And so this another risk here is there may not be an interest from investigators to do this, especially once you get to your primary endpoint, then get year over year data. That's not interesting to many scientists in the community, but yet it's required from a regulatory standpoint.
Yeah, so, no, I see that, and as you said, more we are going up, and more we are trying to get more data, more information, more things. So more there can be some risk and also some issues when we are gathering those data. Okay, so what is the next one?
They've got three more. One would be the national registries, and I've been involved with, the ACC and CDR database, the SCAR database, and a registry in Sweden.
So what is the difference between a registry and the database? I mean, what is exactly?
Well, I'm probably using the term synonymously and probably shouldn't, but here's an example of where either a country or a organization is sponsoring following patients in a independent registry, as an example. It is a database and network, but it's not like the hospital database that I was referring to earlier, because these are not really sponsored by
so it's a registry is specifically to a company, specifically to a product, maybe specifically to something. So it's not like something where a lot of companies are coming and putting things inside. It's specific to one product.
And so companies can do registries also, but what I'm referring to here are these national registries that are not run by companies, that are run by either the country or maybe an organization, as an example.
So those registries, national registries, as you mentioned, so everybody can have access to that, or it's something that is...
Usually if you're contributing, I mean, it depends depending on the national registry, as an example, but in general, if a hospital is contributing to this registry, they would have access, certain types of access to the results of that. And so what you would do is you would work with a healthcare practitioner that's involved with sending data into the registry and work with them to try to capture information about your product, as an example. It does capture real world experience again. And one thing I would say is I think this is going to be an area that, Munir, you and I are going to see growing over the years, because there's a lot of interest in traceability and transparency of how devices are working that the MDR is bringing to the table. So I think we'll see more and more of these are coming up all over the world, but especially in Europe.
Okay.
There are some risks here, and I can tell you that, I've been involved with in terms of budgeting. I put down about $300,000 US per year on something like this. This could change. This could be lower or higher depending on what you're extracting and things like this. But here's one of the risks. A real risk here is there's really a limited ability for a manufacturer to change the database or to change the registry, because this is not being run by them. It's being run by an association or a country, as an example. So you don't have a lot of good flexibility to change something to get more specific information about your product.
Okay, so if you think that there is a specific function or a specific element that you have to get, and this registry is not collecting this information, you cannot change that. You cannot ask for a change there.
Well, it's not easy. I would say it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do.
Okay.
So if you need data, within a year, this is not going to be a good option if it's not already capturing the data that you want.
Okay.
The other risk here, Munir, is there's not all the device components are included. The medical device regulation requires us to get information on all sizes of the device, any kind of accessories that are used, and things like this. And a lot of times, some of these registries will have, let's say, guide wires. They'll just call it guide wire. They won't mention which guide wire it is, as an example. So you won't be able to have specific information about your product, as an example. So not all the components are typically there. There's less flexibility to receive downloads off schedule. So if you have your contract in place and you say we need to get this information, in November every year or whatever, let's say if you want to get something in March, there's not a lot of flexibility to go back and get data whenever you want. It's another new contract, kind of thing. Now you could build in some examples of maybe how frequently you want updates or whatever, but there are challenges with that, working with these national registries. The other thing would be and this has really surprised me. I didn't realize it was so bad. there's actually a data lag in data readiness or data entry into the system. So a hospital system that's contributing to this registry, the data lag may be 6 or 9 months,
okay.
As an example. So if your company finds a signal that's a problem, and recently, that the data may not be robust enough today to get you information you need, because there's other signals that need to be uploaded into the database, and that could take 6 to 9 months, as an example. Okay. And there's limited or no capability to go back to a site, a hospital site, to query a data point that you're interested in that came out that you saw in your analysis. So those are some risks dealing with the national registry.
Yeah, so I see that this is really, if I can say, a good, great database, if I can say that can help you, but there are so many things that are maybe not helping, or that will make maybe the manufacturer take the decision to not go for this kind of solution, because it's not really flexible, as you mentioned. So what is the next one?
So I think that's why we need to have decision trees and maybe use more than one of these approaches, as an example. The last two deal with small manufacturer product registries or randomized controlled trials, or one large trial where the company puts in all their products, as an example. And I'll cover both of those at the same time. There are a little different. One would probably cost, 2 to 5 million early on, and then there's a maintenance fee after that, and maybe the other one is 40 to 50 million early on, and then a maintenance few million to keep it maintained. But from a small registry perspective, manufacturers have a lot of experience running these. We've been able to find manufacturer-friendly physicians or healthcare practitioners to help us with this. There's interest in the community to do these kinds of studies and be involved, and the manufacturer has a lot of control from a large perspective, large registry perspective. The ability to expand your label in claims or indications would exist, if you have a large database like this that you could use. Some risk here would be, I would say it's in the category of the profitability of some of the products that may lead to, showing lower margins or profit from these devices. So it'll get the manufacturers talking about what should we do, because if we're going to spend this money to collect this data and we're not making a lot of profit on this product, we have to have these tough discussions about whether we should, continue to produce this, because there's going to be a requirement for evidence to be generated for this product, as an example. There's long lead times for those of you involved in clinical investigations, how you get these things started, both from a small and large perspective. Physicians and practitioners are typically not very excited about these kind of studies once the primary endpoint is reached, as an example, and they certainly lose their enthusiasm, year over year over year, because it's, quote, not science anymore. But from a regulatory standpoint, it's data that we need. If from a large budgetary standpoint, it really impacts a manufacturer's R&D budget, because the thing that gets a lot of attention to manufacturers is this ability to bring new products or more innovative products, and spending money on these large registries takes that money away from being able to invest early on in product development.
So I think those registries, or those big ones, are really for high-risk products. We are not doing that for products with low risk, without really a big, if I can say, forecast or big amount of money that we can make for them. It's really for high-risk products where we need really to get some specific data, and it's why we have to invest so much money to have those information, so that we can be sure that the products remain on the market.
Yeah, but if you look at the portfolio of some companies, some companies have a lot of low risk and medium risk devices, but that they could get some data if they had included some of these products in their registry. So this would be an option for them to consider in order to get the information on their product, as an example. But you're right, the way the current practice is today, it's really just limited to higher risk devices, as an example.
Okay, so great. So now we have 6 sources of clinical evaluation or clinical data. So just as a reminder, we have the surveys, we have the hospital database, we have the ISS, we have the national registries, and the small products and the large registry. So small products registry and large registry. So now I am a company. Can I go only for a survey? Then
I mean that's the trap. That's the trap because
I know. But how can they choose to? As we said, it's really a balance between the money that we put to have those information and the really necessity to have this amount of information. So how do I go to choose here?
Yeah, it's going to be a conversation that needs to happen within the organization. Basically, when I have discussions like this with manufacturers, I tell them, what do you know? We have discussions about what do you know about the product, how current is the data, the clinical data that you have on the product, and where are the gaps in what we understand about what's in your label in terms of intended use or any claims that are being made from that perspective, and then develop strategies, multiple strategies, in order to get data to support the documentation to support those label claims or indications, as an example. And so, like I said before, I can give my own personal experiences working with regulatory agencies, competent authorities, notified bodies all over the world. If you have a higher risk, let's say it's the implantable or class 3 or active device, as an example, they're going to want substantial amount of level of evidence to validate the safety and performance of this device, and they're not going to be looking at least costly methods here. They're going to look at appropriate methods for those kind of devices. So so basically, how do you decide? I basically lead them through a decision tree analysis. What's your portfolio look like? We could put everything on the left-hand side, everything on the right-hand side, or combination of things in the middle. And so far, every one of these conversations have led to making sure that there's multiple collection of sufficient clinical evidence using several different options, as an example. And I think that's the way that you need to approach this, depending on the question you're wanting to answer, because you don't have this information in your technical documentation.
No,
does that get it? Yeah.
I think it's great. So So as we said, also I will attach on the show notes this document that you provided me, where you are mentioning those information here about the different clinical data source, the cost of it also, and also some other information there. So please just go to the show notes, so podcast.easymedicaldevice.com, and download this PDF deck, and then try to get more information from there. Okay, David, so now let's talk more about you. So what strategic global solution can provide to its customers? So what can you do to help the customers here, or the medical device manufacturers?
Well, I provided your listeners with a list of 20 things that we can do to help you today.
Okay.
Kind of thing. I can tell you what's occupying my time right now, and that is understanding the results of the gap assessments that are being done with manufacturers. A few years ago, it was a big topic to do gap assessments. I think a lot of companies have had some experience with that. So dealing with the consequences of a gap assessment, the idea about, I call this the long pole in the tent in terms of the clinical evidence and the technical documentation. This is going to take a lot of time to get this information. And one of the things I tell manufacturers is, there's no shortcuts here. It's like having a baby. It takes 9 months. It doesn't matter how many people you throw at it or how much money you invest in it. It takes time. It's going to take 9 months to have a baby.
It's funny because when you are saying that, it's something I'm always hearing from some people, that some CEO come to me and say, Munir, how much you need for making that happen quickly? You can give me millions, it will not change anything. In the timing, so I cannot change that. So
yeah, that's exactly right. So right now, I'm spending a lot of my time immediately trying to help manufacturers get data right now. Basically, that's where and I think I'll see more, and you'll see this also more and more throughout the rest of this year and into 2020, as information about what actual data they have that's going to be credible, that's going to be compliant, that's going to be current in their technical documentation, and having these real tough conversations with an agency or with a notified body about maybe what's lacking. Because I said, earlier that just because you believe the device is safe because of something you did years ago, it may not be the state of the art today, and you'll need to have evidence here. So I'm seeing this now. This is where I'm spending a lot of my time, and several teams members that are helping me with this are spending a lot of my time trying to develop this clinical evidence. So kind of implementing this strategy that I talked about September 2017 and wrote this neat little article in LinkedIn just recently about this.
No, I think it's great. Yeah. So if people really want to get some more information about clinical data, so then they can directly go to David. I think you really need, with the MDR, clinical data is really something that is gold now. So you have really to find it and to put it on your documentation and to prove that your product is safe. So please contact David directly so that he can really help you and try to provide you all the knowledge needed. And as I said, he provided graciously this document to download. So please go on the podcast so you can download that directly.
Yeah, can I close by just saying a couple of different things real quickly as we get close here? I've got a couple of things I want to say that, one of the things I've noticed is, and I'll tell manufacturers, if the notified body wants chocolate, quit trying to sell them vanilla. In other words, you need to really use your ears and listening to, what they've either what they're saying to you, or what they're communicating to you in writing. The other thing is that there's a need to access large data populations, and I've got this really great history with this 1M data group that's really been helpful for several manufacturers. Take a risk-based approach in what you're doing. Look at these 6 options as options to develop your strategy around using one or more of these options, and ask the right question. Make sure it's the question is going to be relevant to what you know and what you don't know about your device, and then build a strategy that's statistically, scientifically, and clinically strong and compliant. As an example, I've dealt with some manufacturers that say we have all this information, and I say it in a nice way, but I tell them that sometimes when you have a lot of something, you sometimes don't have anything. So you got to take a really healthy, realistic look at the data that you have and assess it to see how valuable that data is today, in the current state of the art. So that'd be what I want to kind of control.
No, I think it's a great information here, and please, as manufacturers, so you should really understand that this can take time to get. You need to really to get accurate information. You should not just get everything and try to put that on your file to say more we have, better it is. No, it should be really accurate, specific, and to the point. So I hope that with all the information that David provided you, it will be really helpful for you, and that you can now start to decide how you should get your clinical data.
One thing I remembered also wanted to say, Munir, that there's a lot of changes that are occurring in the medical device regulation all over the world, but in Europe. I have found this tool that BSI offers called Compliance Navigator as a great tool to be able to keep up with the changes that are occurring. So that was one of the things I want to make sure I didn't end the podcast without saying, because it personally, I've used this for years. It's personally helped me to have one source of where not only the law, let's say the regulations are, in guidance documents is, expert opinions, red lines of documents that are being looked at right now are, but it also is a place where I'll get some things fed to me on a monthly basis, as an example, about what's changing, to give me a heads up about what's happening in our device as we're sitting in our industry, as we're sitting in November 2019 today. We've still got several documents that we're still wanting to get final approval and delivery from the commission and working groups about, sufficient clinical evidence, et cetera. And this is going to be a good way to keep me and others up to date about what's changing in terms of things that are coming out of the MDR, as an example. So It's called Compliance Navigator. It's a great tool, and I'm happy to talk to those about my own personal experience, but it's vital, in my opinion, that you have a tool like this.
Yeah, I saw this tool, and I saw that BSI is also providing a lot of information. Their white paper is also great about technical files or GSPR or everything. So yeah, they have really made a lot of effort to help the community to be on the good shape for the MDR. Right. So I think it's a source of information.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so please then don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Don't forget also to provide some reviews. I think it's really important for everybody that we have really a podcast that gets some good reviews. So please go also to the YouTube channel. I'm also trying to provide more videos there. I'm having some videos that are not shown on the podcast so that you can also get some more information. And don't forget to subscribe and to click on the bell icon so that you can also get notified when there is a new video coming. So David, thank you for your help. Thank you for all the information you provided. As I've said, I will also share the document that you gave me on the show notes so that people can download it. Then I wish you a nice day.
Thank you. You're doing great work, Munir. Keep it up. You're really giving a good service to our industry. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.